You wake to the sound of chains rattling in the darkness. The stone beneath your body is so cold it burns, and when you try to move, iron shackles bite into your wrists. You're no longer in the hillside village where you chased goats and helped your mother grind grain. That life ended 3 days ago when the slave traders came through your settlement like a plague of locusts, selecting their harvest with practiced eyes. Your name was Caius, a simple Celtic name your father gave you after his father. But that name died the moment rough hands dragged you from your family's hut. Now your property, inventory, a commodity to be evaluated and priced. The man examining you speaks Latin in clipped, businesslike tones, running his fingers through your hair like he's testing the quality of silk, lifting your chin to study your bone structure in the flickering torchlight. "This one will do well," he says to his associate, a Greek with calculating eyes who nods and makes marks on a wax tablet. "Celtic stock always brings premium prices. Look at that coloring, like spun gold, and young enough to train properly." You don't understand all the words, but you understand the tone. You've heard it before when your father sold livestock at the market. The same appraising quality, the same discussion of value and potential, except now you're the livestock, and the market is Rome's insatiable appetite for beauty that can be owned, controlled, and consumed. The journey to Rome blurs into a nightmare of cramped wagons, sparse meals, and the constant presence of other children who share your fate. Some cry constantly, others have retreated into silence so complete they seem to have died while still breathing. A few, the ones who scare you most, have already begun adapting, learning Latin phrases from the guards, trying to curry favor with small acts of submission. But it's when you reach the slave markets of Rome that the true horror reveals itself. This isn't the chaotic scramble you imagined. It's organized, systematic, efficient. The markets dealing in what Romans call delicati, delicate ones, operate with the precision of a military campaign and the aesthetics of an art gallery. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. You're bathed first, scrubbed until your skin glows pink, then oiled with fragrances that make you smell like flowers you've never seen. Your hair is trimmed and styled by a man whose hands move with the practiced efficiency of someone who has prepared hundreds of boys for sale. They dress you in a simple white tunic that emphasizes your youth and innocence, a costume designed to trigger specific desires in potential buyers. The inspection process is methodical and humiliating. Buyers circle you like wolves, evaluating prey, discussing your merits and flaws in voices that make no attempt to acknowledge your humanity. They test your teeth like you're a horse, examine your skin for blemishes, measure the proportion of your limbs with the same attention a sculptor might give to marble. Some speak to you in broken Celtic, testing whether you understand commands. Others are more interested in your emotional responses, how you react to touch, whether you flinch or submit, if tears come easily or if you've already learned to hide them. Marcus Lucullus is the one who eventually buys you. He's in his 40s, soft around the middle from good living, with intelligent eyes that miss nothing. He examines you with the thoroughness of a connoisseur, running his hands along your arms and shoulders, tilting your face toward the light to study your features from different angles. When he speaks to the dealer, his voice carries the casual authority of someone accustomed to acquiring whatever strikes his fancy. "How old?" he asks, though he's clearly already made his assessment. 12, maybe 13, the dealer responds. "Young enough to train properly, old enough to be interesting. And look at this bone structure. He'll age beautifully for several years before you need to think about replacement." The casual mention of your eventual disposal hits you like a physical blow. You're not just being sold into slavery. You're being sold into a system with a built-in expiration date, where your value will inevitably decline and your usefulness will end. But even this realization pales beside the growing understanding of what your specific role will be. The transaction completes with the same mundane efficiency as buying bread. Money changes hands, ownership papers are signed, and suddenly you belong to Marcus Lucullus as completely as his toga or his sandals. He doesn't speak to you directly. Slaves don't merit conversation, but gives instructions to a well-dressed older man who will oversee your transport to your new home. The villa that becomes your world is more beautiful than anything you could have imagined in your village life. Marble floors inlaid with intricate mosaics, walls painted with scenes from mythology, gardens where exotic plants fill the air with perfumes that make your head swim. But beauty becomes sinister when you realize it's designed as a setting for your captivity. Every lovely detail is part of an elaborate stage set where you'll perform a role you never auditioned for. Your education begins immediately. The man overseeing your training is called Alexandros, himself a former favorite, who has aged into a position of relative security by becoming indispensable in managing his master's collection of beautiful boys. He's not unkind, but his kindness carries the detached quality of someone who has learned to survive by not forming emotional attachments to those who will inevitably be replaced. The master prefers intelligent conversation, he explains as he outlines your daily schedule. You'll study Greek philosophy, Roman poetry, basic arithmetic, and musical performance. Your body must remain pleasing. We'll control your diet carefully, and you'll bathe twice daily with oils that keep your skin soft. Most importantly, you'll learn deportment. How to walk, how to sit, how to lower your eyes at the right moment, how to appear attentive without seeming to listen when the master discusses business with his guests. The lessons are comprehensive and exhausting. Language instruction occupies your mornings, not just Latin and Greek, but the subtle differences in tone and vocabulary appropriate for different social situations. You learn that there are specific ways to address senators versus merchants, particular phrases that show respect without appearing servile, careful modulations of voice that suggest intelligence without threatening your master's intellectual superiority. Afternoons are devoted to cultural education. You memorize vast passages of poetry, not because you find them beautiful, though some are, but because you might be called upon to recite them for your master's entertainment. You study the myths behind the artwork decorating the villa, learning to discuss the symbolic meanings while carefully avoiding any interpretation that might make you seem too scholarly or independent. Music lessons follow, and here you discover a small refuge. The lyre responds to your touch with sounds that briefly transport you beyond the marble walls. For a few moments each day you can lose yourself in melodies that have no purpose except their own beauty. But even this sanctuary is compromised when you realize that every song you learn is chosen for its potential to please your master's ears during intimate moments. Physical conditioning forms another crucial part of your training, though it's unlike any exercise you've known. There's no development of strength or endurance. Instead, every effort focuses on maintaining the soft, androgynous beauty that your master prized at the market. Your diet is carefully controlled to prevent the muscle development that would mark your transition into manhood. Herbs are added to your food, oils rubbed into your skin, treatments administered by physicians who specialize in preserving youthful appearance. The psychological conditioning proves more subtle and more devastating than the physical training. Slowly, methodically, your trainers erode your sense of independent identity. Your birth name is forbidden. You're now called Ganymedes, after Zeus's beautiful Kubra. Your memories of home are dismissed as irrelevant fantasies. Your former life is described as a dream from which you've awakened into your true reality. Most insidiously, you're taught that your value as a human being depends entirely on your ability to please your master. Success means maintaining beauty, youth, and perfect submission. Failure means not just punishment, but complete worthlessness. This message is reinforced constantly, through rewards for compliance and subtle but unmistakable threats for resistance. The other boys in the household become both companions and competition. There's Alexis, a Syrian boy with dark eyes who arrived 6 months before you and has learned to navigate the system with frightening skill. He shows you the techniques for applying cosmetics to enhance your natural coloring, teaches you the particular ways your master likes his wine mixed, warns you about the questions you should never ask and the topics you should never raise. Then there's Dionysios, a Greek boy who has been in the household for 3 years. He moves through the villa like a ghost, beautiful but somehow absent, responding to commands with perfect obedience, but showing no spark of individual personality. The other boys whisper that he's what happens when someone surrenders completely to the system, still functional, still valuable, but no longer entirely human. Your first private summons comes 3 weeks after your arrival. Alexandros spends the entire day preparing you, selecting the perfect tunic that emphasizes your slender build, arranging your hair to catch the lamplight, applying subtle cosmetics that enhance your youth without appearing artificial. He coaches you on proper behavior, how to enter the room, where to position yourself, how to respond to commands without seeming eager or reluctant. Remember, he says as he makes final adjustments to your appearance, you exist for his pleasure. Your thoughts, your feelings, your desires, none of these matter. What matters is that you provide whatever he needs in this moment. Sometimes that's conversation, sometimes silent companionship, sometimes more intimate service. Your job is to sense what he wants and provide it before he has to ask. The walk to your master's private chambers feels endless. Though it's only the length of a corridor, your bare feet make no sound on the marble, but your heart pounds so loudly, you're certain everyone in the villa can hear it. The guards at the door step aside without acknowledgement. You're not significant enough to merit their attention, and suddenly you're alone with the man who owns you completely. Marcus Lucullus reclines on a couch, upholstered in silk, a cup of wine in his hand, scrolls scattered around him suggesting he's been reading. He's removed his formal toga and wears only a simple tunic, but the casual dress doesn't diminish his authority. If anything, the intimacy of the setting makes his power more apparent. "Come here, boy," he says without looking up from his scroll. His voice is neither harsh nor kind, merely matter-of-fact, the tone he might use to summon a servant or call a dog. You approach slowly, unsure how close he wants you to come, stopping just beyond arm's reach until he gestures for you to move closer. "Turn around," he commands, and you obey, moving slowly so he can examine you from all angles. His eyes assess you with the same thoroughness he showed at the slave market, noting the effects of weeks of careful grooming and training. When he nods approval, you feel a confusing mixture of relief and shame, grateful to have passed his inspection, horrified that your worth depends on his aesthetic satisfaction. "Alexandros tells me you're learning quickly," he continues, setting down his wine and giving you his full attention. "Recite something for me. Something Greek. I'm in the mood for philosophy." You begin a passage from Plato's Symposium, chosen because it's beautiful and because you've memorized it perfectly. As you speak, you watch his face for signs of pleasure or displeasure, modulating your voice according to his expressions. When he smiles slightly at a particularly elegant phrase, you feel a surge of pride that immediately disgusts you. You're learning to find satisfaction in his approval, exactly as your training intended. "Lovely," he says when you finish. "Your accent needs work, but that will come with time. Sit beside me." "No, closer than that. I want to feel your warmth while I read." The next hour passes in a strange kind of intimacy that bears no resemblance to any relationship you've known. You sit perfectly still while he reads, occasionally stroking your hair absently, like you might pet a favored cat. Sometimes he reads passages aloud, testing your comprehension with questions that probe both your intelligence and your training. When you give answers that please him, his touch becomes more affectionate. When you fail to understand something, his attention withdraws, and you learn to dread that withdrawal more than any physical punishment. This becomes the pattern of your new existence. Days spent in training and preparation, evenings summoned to provide whatever form of companionship your master desires. Sometimes it's intellectual, discussions of philosophy or poetry, where you're expected to be engaged but never challenging. Sometimes it's purely aesthetic. You serve as living decoration while he entertains guests, proof of his refined taste and unlimited resources. And sometimes it's more intimate, in ways that your previous life provided no context for understanding. You learn that your body, like your mind, exists for his pleasure. The beautiful room, the expensive education, the careful grooming, all of it is part of a system designed to make you a more satisfying possession. You're not a person who happens to be owned. You're an object crafted specifically for his use. The psychological impact proves more devastating than any physical abuse. You begin to lose track of where your performance ends and your identity begins. The mannerisms you've learned to please your master become automatic. The interests he's cultivated in you start to feel genuine. Most disturbing of all, you catch yourself feeling genuine affection for the man who has stripped away your freedom and reshaped you according to his desires. Other boys in the household have found different ways to survive. Alexis has become a master manipulator, playing on their master's emotions with such skill that he's achieved a position of relative security. He whispers secrets about managing their master's moods, about subtle ways to encourage his generosity, about techniques for remaining valuable as physical beauty inevitably fades. The key, he explains during a rare private moment, is to make yourself indispensable for more than just your looks. Learn his business interests, so you can provide useful insights. Become skilled at managing the household, so he depends on your efficiency. Cultivate relationships with his important guests, so he values your social utility. Beauty fades, but usefulness can last for years. Dionysius represents a different survival strategy, complete surrender. He has erased himself so thoroughly that he no longer seems to experience wants or fears or hopes. He responds to commands with perfect obedience, provides whatever service is required, and exists in a state of such complete submission that resistance has become literally unthinkable. In some ways he seems content, but his contentment is the peace of death, not life. You try to find a middle path between Alexis's calculated manipulation and Dionysius's spiritual suicide. You perform your role with skill but try to maintain some inner core of self that remains untouched by your circumstances. It's harder than you imagined. The system is designed to make resistance not just difficult but incomprehensible. When every aspect of your existence depends on pleasing your master, when your sense of worth has been rebuilt around his approval, the very concept of independent thought becomes alien. Months pass, then years. Your body begins showing the first subtle signs of approaching manhood, a deepening voice that must be disguised with careful breath control, muscle development that requires increasingly drastic dietary restrictions, facial hair that demands daily removal. Each change brings anxiety about your continued usefulness and value. The household dynamics shift as new boys arrive and older ones disappear. You witness the entire cycle, the terror of fresh arrivals, the gradual adaptation to their circumstances, the careful maneuvering for position and favor, and finally the inevitable disposal when youth fades beyond concealment. Some boys are sold to other households, others manumitted with small pensions, a few simply vanish without explanation. You develop complex relationships with your fellow captives. There's genuine friendship mixed with bitter competition, mutual support shadowed by the knowledge that any of you might be sacrificed to preserve the other's positions. You share techniques for survival, warn each other about their master's changing moods, and provide comfort during the inevitable moments of despair. But you also compete for favor, knowing that being the preferred boy means better treatment and greater security. The outside world exists, but remains largely irrelevant to your daily existence. You hear news of military campaigns, political developments, social changes, but these events feel as distant as mythology. Your world has shrunk to the boundaries of the villa, and your concerns have narrowed to the immediate requirements of survival within that confined space. Occasionally glimpses of your former life surface unbidden. The smell of bread baking might trigger memories of your mother's kitchen. A merchant's accent could remind you of your father's voice. These moments bring such intense pain that you learn to suppress them immediately, focusing instead on the present reality that defines your existence. Your master ages too, though more gradually and comfortably than his possessions. Grey appears in his hair, lines develop around his eyes, his body thickens with continued prosperity. But these changes don't threaten his position or security. If anything, they enhance his gravitas and social standing. Age brings him wisdom and respect, while it brings you only the approaching end of your usefulness. The realization that your time is limited creates a strange urgency in your daily existence. Every successful performance feels like a stay of execution. Every sign of your master's continued satisfaction becomes precious. You find yourself grateful for small kindnesses, a gentle touch, a moment of genuine conversation, an expensive gift, even though you understand that these gestures reflect his attachment to a possession, not recognition of your humanity. Some boys crack under this pressure, becoming increasingly desperate in their attempts to remain valuable. They volunteer for more degrading services, compete more viciously with their fellow captives, or simply break down entirely under the stress of maintaining an impossible standard of perfection. Others, like you, learn a kind of stoic acceptance, performing your role with professional competence while trying to preserve some small sense of dignity. The system's most insidious aspect is how it makes victims complicit in their own exploitation. You become skilled at anticipating your master's desires, proud of your ability to provide satisfaction, competitive with other boys for the privilege of serving. The training is so thorough that you internalize not just the behaviors but the values of your captors, measuring your worth by their standards and finding identity in their approval. Years of this existence create a kind of Stockholm syndrome, so complete that freedom becomes not just impossible but unimaginable. When you occasionally hear stories of slaves who attempted escape, your first reaction isn't admiration but puzzlement. Where would they go? How would they survive? What identity could they claim outside the roles they've been trained to fill? The system doesn't just imprison your body, it colonizes your imagination, making alternatives to captivity literally unthinkable. Yet even within this total system, small acts of resistance remain possible. You retain fragments of your original language, though you never speak it aloud. You preserve memories of your family, though you rarely allow yourself to access them. Most importantly, you maintain awareness that your current existence is not your only possible identity, even if you can't imagine any practical alternative. The end, when it comes, arrives with the same casual efficiency that marked your beginning in this life. Your master's interests have shifted toward younger acquisitions, and your approaching physical maturity makes you less suitable for the role you've filled. There's no dramatic confrontation or emotional farewell, just a quiet conversation with Alexandros about your future placement. The master has arranged for your manumission, he explains with the detached professionalism that has characterized every aspect of your training. You'll receive a modest inheritance and recommendations for employment in a senatorial household. Your education and deportment make you suitable for administrative or tutorial positions. The irony is bitter. Your exploitation has equipped you with skills that make you valuable in the legitimate world, but only because those skills were developed through years of abuse. Your education in languages, literature, and social graces opens doors, but each opportunity reminds you of how you acquired these qualifications. Your perfect manners and instinctive deference to authority make you an ideal subordinate, but these traits were beaten into you through psychological conditioning. Freedom, when it comes, feels less like liberation than displacement. After years of having every moment structured and every decision made for you, the responsibility of independent choice proves overwhelming. You've been trained to anticipate others' desires so thoroughly that identifying your own wants becomes nearly impossible. The world outside the villa is vast and full of possibilities, but you lack the framework for navigating it as a free agent. The other boys you leave behind represent all the paths you might have taken. Some will adapt successfully to their new circumstances, finding ways to transform their survival skills into legitimate success. Others will struggle with the transition, unable to function without the structure that defined their existence. A few will never leave at all, aging into positions like Alexandros, becoming part of the system that shaped them. As you walk away from the villa for the last time, you carry with you not just the skills and knowledge that will define your future, but the scars, visible and invisible, that will never fully heal. Your story joins the thousands of similar stories that Rome's historians chose not to record, voices silenced by a civilization that preferred to remember its glory rather than confront its shame. The empire that created this system eventually fell, but not before generations of boys like you passed through its machinery of desire. Their names are forgotten, their experiences dismissed as footnotes to grander narratives of conquest and cultural achievement. But their suffering was real, their resilience remarkable, and their stories deserve to be remembered as more than just the price paid for Roman luxury. In the end, you become both victim and survivor, shaped by forces beyond your control but not entirely defined by them. The boy who was taken from a Celtic hillside and the man who eventually walked free from a Roman villa are connected by an unbroken thread of identity that no amount of training could completely sever. That thread, thin as it sometimes became, represents the irreducible core of human dignity that even the most sophisticated systems of exploitation cannot entirely destroy. The marble halls are empty now, the golden doors have crumbled, and the empire that normalized such exploitation has long since fallen to dust. But in remembering these forgotten voices, in acknowledging the human cost of what history often celebrates as civilization's achievements, we honor not just their suffering but our own responsibility to recognize similar patterns wherever they emerge in our own time. The faces change, the methods evolve, but the fundamental dynamic remains, those with power finding ways to exploit those without it, particularly when youth and beauty are involved. Their secret lives were never truly secret. They were simply ignored by those who preferred not to see. In telling their stories now, we ensure that their suffering was not entirely meaningless, and perhaps in some small way, we help prevent others from walking down those same torchlit corridors toward doors that should never open for children at all.